Welcome to HBTV. Today is an hour later for people in the US because we're behind the UK on changing from daylight savings time to regular standard time. So the time difference has shrunk, and 8 o'clock is only 4 o'clock here instead of 3 o'clock, but next week we'll catch up. Sorry, 2 weeks. We're going to a bi-weekly schedule in which I'm going to be talking about a single topic in logical progression, and that topic is free will. I'm Harry Binswanger, the HB in HBTV. I'm a philosopher who advocates Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. Today, we're going to begin this series on the topic that is central to objectivism, the topic of free will. Not just free will, but the specifically objectivist understanding of free will, which is different from and superior to all the traditional theories of free will that have been offered. Ayn Rand wrote an article in 1973 entitled "The Metaphysically Given versus the Man-Made." Metaphysically given versus the man-made. Or for short, I think it's the metaphysical versus the man-made. She opens it with a quote from a prayer, which is pretty amazing for an atheist. God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Let me repeat that. God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. After explaining that she does not agree with religion and she does not accept the idea of a prayer, she goes on to say that it names a very important fact. And she says, quote, "Most men spend their lives in futile rebellion against things they cannot change, in passive resignation to things they can, and never attempting to learn the difference, in chronic guilt and self-doubt on both counts." The difference that you need wisdom and effort to understand is free will. The difference between the things you can change and the things you cannot is that one is under the control of your free will and the other is not. This has been a major issue in the whole history of philosophy, at least since the Stoics. The issue of free will did not come into focus before the Stoics. The reason for that is that no one had thought of denying free will until the Stoics. The Stoics, although you might think from what the press they get is, the Stoics are determinists. They deny free will. And the issue I want to place in historical perspective and cover all the bases of is free will versus its denial. The major form of its denial is called determinism. Everything that you do or think or say according to determinism is necessitated by antecedent factors over which you have no control. So choice is an illusion. You have no free will according to determinus. Everything is set by earlier things. Everything, including what you think and do, is set by earlier things which were causally made necessary by still earlier things, going back to however far you can go back. Billions and billions of years, to sound like Carl Sagan. So you think there are things you can change, but whether or not you change them, the determinist says, is up to an accident of the causal situation. It's not due to your will. Some things will change because circumstances change, because the determining factors that make you do what you do will change. Other things won't change because, not because you failed, but because, say the determinists, the circumstances didn't change the causes that made them necessary. Now, I want to explain a little bit about necessitated, that word. Everything you do is made necessary, is necessitated, they say, meaning for you to do anything different would involve a logical contradiction. The necessary is that, the opposite of which is a self-contradiction. So, for instance, take the biblical myth of the burning bush that was not consumed. Burning is a process of burning up, of consuming. So a bush that's burning but not burning up is not burning. Burning is the combination of material from that which is burning and the oxygen in the atmosphere to produce gases that leave. So unless God coated the bush with lighter fuel and that's what's burning up, and I don't think he would kid us like that. The idea of a burning bush that's not burning up means a burning bush that's not burning. It's a self-contradiction. It's necessary that if something burns, it burns up. It's consumed. It's converted into gases and ash. That's what burning is. So in the same way, if what you do and say and think is made necessary, then for you not to have done that, not to have thought that, not to have said that, would be as anti-logical as the burning bush that isn't burning. It would be the causes operating on you that are not operating on you. So determinists, we're the enemy here. They're the ones I'm going to excoriate and refute. The determinists think that the law of causality requires that there be no free will. There's a clash, they say, between causality and free will. Now that leaves open another viewpoint. So we have free will, which says, no, you cause your actions. You cause what you do. You cause your thoughts. And the determinists who say, no, you don't. It's set for you by your genes, your social environment, by something. Something runs you. That's determinism. But there's another viewpoint that's maybe worse than determinism, and it's called indeterminism. Indeterminism. Indeterminism is the view that not everything is made necessary because some things just happen. They're just freak accidents. There's no answer to why did they happen. There's no causality operated. Bang, something just goes off. And frequently, people will invoke the name of science to support their idea of indeterminism. They will say the disintegration of a radioactive atom, like the radium atom or the uranium-235 atom, is a random, uncaused event. There's nothing that can explain it. There's nothing that causes it. a proton and a neutron in some cases, they're just emitted from the nucleus spontaneously as a freak accident. I think that's possibly worse than determinism because it's anti-scientific along with being anti-man. At least determinism in its modern form is scientific. This view is anti-science. It doesn't think of itself as anti-science. It says this is what we found on the quantum level, but it is. We haven't found that. There's no way to validate that idea, that interpretation of what we observe. So it thinks causality, mechanistic causality applies to nothing. It's a myth. And notice it wouldn't do any good. Sometimes they say, oh, well, man may have free will because physics has shown us that there's causelessness down on the deep quantum level. Maybe the brain can exploit the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and the fact that an electron isn't located exactly anywhere to carve out an area from strict necessity for free will. But no, that's not free will. For things to happen to you out of the blue without you doing them is no better than if you wear the chains of iron necessity and you have to do what you're set up to do. Historical footnote. Only recently has determinism become scientific. By a great amount, the largest number of determinists in history have been religionists. God has his plan. God controls what you do. There are the damned and the elect. I mean, different religions have different versions of it. Fatalism. If Allah wills it, my choice has nothing. I have no choice. I'm just a player in Allah's plans. So a lot of religions are fatalistic, which just is another word for deterministic. But they think the causes are divine or spiritual or from God, rather than the causes are from electrons. So both these schools deny self-control. Both these schools say, you think you are the author of your acts. You think you're an autonomous being. But really, that's an illusion, a mistake. One side says it's a mistake because causal necessity has you in its grips and you're a puppet of matter. The other side says it's an illusion. Oh, sorry, I'm changing. There's three sides if you want to bring in the religious. You're in the causal grips of God's fingers pulling the strings. But the indeterminists say, no, you have no choice. Your choices have no effect. Things just happen to you. You just find yourself doing things or saying things or wanting things. And it's like the disintegration of the radium atom. Things happen, you can't explain it. It's just causeless. It's just sheer random chaos. Well, that's not a theory of self-control, self-direction, free will. I am the captain of my fate. Not that at all. Now, as you would expect, if you know anything about contemporary philosophy, there's a view also that evades it altogether, evades the whole question. And it's called compatibilism. Oh, free will is compatible with determinism. Yes, we have free will, but we're also determined. How did they pull that one off? So the free willist says we have choices and we control our destiny through our choices. The determinist says, no, you don't. And your destiny is determined by matter in motion or God's plan. It doesn't matter which form he is. Something outside you runs you. Now, outside you includes your brain in this context. If you're run by the physical processes of your brain, conceived of as physiology, as matter in motion, that's the same as being run by emanations from the stars in the astrological view of, if you can call it that, of man. So outside you means not under your control, not within your mind, not something that you can observe and see and take charge of. So both, how do the compatibilists square free will and determinism? One side says yes, the other side says no. One side says necessitated, the other says not necessitated. One side says choice is an illusion, the other side says choice is genuine. How do they reconcile those? How can you say, well, yeah, they're both true? By giving the whole show to the determinist and trying to retain the language of free will. So they say, well, everything is determined by antecedent factors beyond your control, but you can still do what you want to do. The fact that you are ultimately determined by factors beyond your control doesn't mean there isn't a decision that you decide to do and things that somebody grabs you. And, if a woman is raped, that's a very different thing from a woman having consensual sex. One was in accordance with her will, the other was against her will. So that remains, even though the wills themselves are determined. It's sometimes called the argument from Smiling Bridegrooms. The argument from Smiling Bridegrooms. There's the bridegroom walking down the aisle about to marry his beloved, and he's smiling. He's marrying her of his own free will. It's not a shotgun wedding. And is that so out of date that people don't even know that? In the old days in the hillbilly country, the father who found out that a man was consorting with his daughter got out the shotgun and made them get married. That was called a shotgun wedding. Now that's not of the bridegroom's free will. So there is, yes, free will is valid if you interpret it in that way. But the issue of free will versus determinism is about causality and control. It's not about politics. It's not something he gave his consent to or not. Is it something he's glad happens or not? It's about whether he has charge over his soul and his actions. So if you saw Lawrence of Arabia, I seem to remember this quote. I mean, I know I remember it. I don't know if it's accurate. A man can do what he wants to do, but he can't want what he wants to want. If that isn't accurate, it should be. It's a great line. A man can do what he wants to do. Oh, I want to marry this woman. But he can't want what he wants to want. I wish I could love so-and-so who's much better person. It's going to bring more happiness to whoever marries her. And she's got money. But I just can't make myself love her. So he can do what he wants to do, but he can't want what he wants to want. So the issue is deeper. It's wanting what you want to want. Well, it's even deeper than that. It's deciding that something is true or good on the basis of objective evidence, not on the basis of some X factor out there, God or genes or whatever, that determines you. Now, I talked, it's a little length about the religious view, fatalism. Let's talk about the non-religious views, because there's two important subtypes. This is views of determinism. I'm not going to discuss indeterminism. It's irrelevant. It's false. It wouldn't be free will. I'm not going to talk about compatibilism, because that says, oh yeah, you are really determined in your sense. Everything you do is necessitated by antecedent factors beyond your control. But we can save the language of free will by reinterpreting it as political freedom, as the absence of force. So I'm not going to talk more about that. It's going to be the sharp opposition of determinism and free will. It helps to talk about the types of determinism, and in addition to the religious determinism, there's two types that pretty much exhaust the field. One is genetic determinism, and the other is social determinism. Genetic determinism is the view that your genes determine what you do. Now, it may be very indirect. It may be that you have a gene for something that makes you interpret. So I was talking about genetic determinism or physical determinism. And this is the form of determinism that leads to racism, or is embodied in racism. Racism is the connection, the position that who a person is determined by his membership in a certain race, which means his physiology. As more primitive people put it, his blood. His blood, Hitler was fond of talking about your blood determines who you are and what you do. So one form of determinism is that you and your character and actions are determined by your physiology, which goes back to your genes, because you've got the physiology you have because of your genes. And your genes go back to the genes of your ancestors. And that goes back to the genes of their ancestors and so on, right back to the origin of the earth. And before that, to the Big Bang or whatever your starting point is, if any. So genetic determinism says the words that are coming out of my mouth now were set when the earth formed, and even before that, at the beginning of time. It was all fated by physical conditions, which led to my genes, which led to my brain, which led to the way I deal with information, and lead to this. Social determinism is really bad. Well, I shouldn't say that. Genetic determinism is probably worse, but social determinism is embarrassing. Social determinism is the view that other people determine what you think. Other people determine what you do. Certain people will be given more formative power on you, like your parents. So what social determinism comes down to. Sorry for that. Florida is not the most stable broadband in the world. I think it's the thunderstorms, even though we got blue sky here. So I'm now Dylan, back on live.
Yes, sir. We're live.
Okay. All right, so let's pick up. We're talking about varieties of determinism, which is the denial of free will. It's the enemy here. Genetic or physiological, and social, which comes down to when other people talk, I have to agree. I can't run my own mind. I just have to obey. I have to follow them. Others are my masters. That's why I said it was worse. It's worse in the sense that it's more humiliating, more embarrassing if at least you say, well, my genes made me do this. it's a little better than saying, well, people told me I should do this, so how could I disagree? Now, I'm going to put forward a theory of free will. I'm not just going to say, oh, man has free will, he has choice, you can tell, you can introspect. I'm going to go into great detail about what your free will is and how to use it to your benefit. But I think to begin with, I need to clear the decks of attachment to determinism. I will have more to say about refuting determinism and showing that free will is an axiom, which it is. But just let's preliminarily point out that determinism is self-refuting. Determinism is incompatible with its own claim to truth. The determinist has to apply his doctrine to himself. So what he has to say is, I can't help but believe that everybody is determined. Something compels me to believe in determinism. I may think it's logical arguments, but I don't know. Something makes me decide that arguments are logical or not. So I don't even know that. All I can say is I'm helpless to disagree with or judge the idea of determinism. It's a compulsion. Everything I do is a compulsion. And that was a compulsion when I said it was a compulsion. And that was a compulsion when I said it was a compulsion that it was a compulsion. So the determinist, and this has been pointed out time and time again in the history of philosophy, but it doesn't seem to make the impact it needs to. Determinism is incompatible with the claim to objective knowledge. Determinism says the content of your mind is set by things you have no control over. Okay, so we'll go back to that argument of determinism's self-refuting nature after we've gotten more information of a positive kind. But I just want to, if you're attracted to determinism and thinking, yeah, causality, everything's caused, and that means everything is necessitated, think again. To be caused is not the same thing as to be necessitated. Determinism is not the view everything you do has causes. It's the view that everything you do has causes such that it would be impossible for you to do anything other than you do. The doctrine of free will, the recognition of free will, it's not even a doctrine, it's a necessary recognition, holds that there is genuine choice, like in deciding what's true, particularly about determinism versus free will, or what I'm saying to you right now. So the advocates of free will, the recognizers of free will, see an open future. It's not just one path that you will take. You're going to choose among the paths available to you. You are, in Ayn Rand's terms, a being of self-made soul. You create your psychology. If there's something you don't like in it, you can change it. The determinist view is that choice is an illusion. The free will illusion, they call it. And the best proponent of that is Sam Harris, whom I will quote from and who will be kind of my antagonist in this series. Quote from Harris, "A moment or two of serious self-scrutiny, and you might observe that you no more decide the next thought you think than the next thought I write." Obviously, you and I didn't decide what Sam Harris wrote next. But what he's saying is a moment of true serious self-scrutiny will show you that you don't decide the next thought you're going to think. And that's half true. That's the interesting thing. There's a big element of truth in that and a big element of falsehood. And to explain the difference, what's true and what's false, is the goal of this series. And it's going to take us into the nature of the subconscious, which is really the brain, that which gives you your thoughts, the content of your thoughts, and the nature of the conscious mind, and the nature of the interaction between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Because I think once you look at how your mind functions cognitively, you can see unquestionably that you have free will. It can't be an illusion. Not because we don't want it to be an illusion, but the very idea of an illusion rests upon the idea of volitional judgment, free will judgment. There are no illusions for animals. A bird may fly into your glass window, mistaking it for air, open air, but there's no judgment. There's really no illusion for that bird because there's nothing to compare what it just sees something. It sees something that looks similar to something else, and it is. If you see a person's twin, look upon him with your eyes. If you see him and he looks exactly like his twin, is that an illusion? No. If you decide with the proposition, that's Joe, when it's really Jim, his twin brother, then in regard to what you saw, there's a mistake. Something looked like something else, so you judged that it was that other thing. But just in the eyes, there's no illusion. You see a stick in water, half submerged in water, and it looks the way a bent stick looks out of water. Is that an illusion for an animal? No. One thing in one circumstances looks like another thing in another circumstances. Another circumstance. There's no illusion there. The illusion, if you want to use that term, comes when you say, oh, that's a bent stick. It looks like a bent stick. I'm calling it a bent stick. No, you were wrong. You didn't realize that the conditions of perception were such that a straight stick looks sort of like a bent stick. Not exactly like, but sort of like a bent stick. So illusions presuppose that you make judgments and that you're in control of those judgments. That's the only way that you could cause, oh my God, I was deceived. I made a mistake. I got on the wrong path by my choices of what I did. All right, so that's not the main point, but that's an interesting aside that we know that free will is an illusion because if free will did not exist, if everything were determined, there wouldn't be any standard to use to call something an illusion. There wouldn't be any free judgment. And an unfree judgment is not a judgment. So the basic point is that the objectivist theory, a basic point is that the objectivist theory of free will is very different from all the historical theories. And let me just say a word. Again, this is just context setting for the main course. These are the appetizers. The objectivist theory does not locate your free will primarily in your actions. It distinguishes what is directly free from what is indirectly free. Your actions are not directly free. You don't just decide, I'm going here, with no context, no preliminaries. That would be indeterminism. You just find you're going, hey, I'm going to right. Why am I going right? No, that's not the way the human nature is. If you take an action, you decided to take it. Sure, there are things that you didn't decide. You absent-mindedly scratch an itch, you sneeze, you have a patellar reflex when the doctor hits your knee with the hammer. Yeah, there are motions of parts of the body that are not due to decision, but those aren't actions, and nobody cares about them. Actions are the things that follow from your decisions. They're the things that you choose to do with your whole body, but you don't choose them directly. How do you reach those decisions? I'm going to order pizza tonight. How do you reach that decision? Well, you remember what pizza tastes like. You remember that you can order up on the phone a pizza to be delivered. You don't think about how much weight gain that will give you. Maybe you do. Maybe you're thin and you don't care. So you consult, or your action follows from your decision, and your decision follows from what's in your memory banks. That's why you won't have fanala tonight for dinner. What? Fanala. What is fanala? Something I don't know. Something you don't know. So you're not going to be having that for dinner. It has to be your actions to be your actions, follow from decisions that you make, not just reflexes. And those decisions result from your thoughts. They're thoughts about factual things like there is such a thing as pizza, and about values. It tastes great. But it's fattening. It's bad for my heart, they tell me. And you weigh the values in the context of your beliefs, your information that you've stored, and you reach a decision. So your actions follow from your decisions. Your decisions follow from your thinking about what's true and what's good. And I don't mean just, narrowly morally good, but anything that's of value or disvalue to you. Do you want anchovies on that pizza? No! Disvalue. So your decisions follow from the content of your mind, which follows from your thinking. You're consulting your stored information. And that's how you reach a decision of action. But the basic choice, the primary choice, is whether you think or not. Now, I mean think. Think rationally, think logically, think in full context, think long range. So pizza, yeah, like Homer Simpson. Pizza, donuts, yes, give me. That's not thinking. That's running on autopilot. But you have the choice to activate the full context of your knowledge, to use all your mental resources to reach a decision rationally. And that's where Ayn Rand sees free will starting. The direct cause of everything that you do, the direct locus of your free will is in the choice to be rational or not, to think or not to think. Now we'll get beneath that a little bit to aspects of it, but basically that's the objectivist theory. A thinking person will develop different beliefs and different values than a non-thinking person. A thinking person having those values and conclusions will choose different actions than a non-thinking person. He might order the pizza. He might decide rationally that's the thing to have. So he might do the same thing as Homer Simpson, but he does it. It's not about, the concrete action. He does it because of his thinking, because he's rational, because he understands where his interests lie. Homer Simpson just has impulses and yields to them. So whether you act on the basis of emotional urges, impulses, and whims, or whether you act on the basis of a rational consideration using all the information you have, that is your free will. Now you see how Harris's statement dissolves once you have that understanding of free will. Read it again. A moment or two of serious self-scrutiny, and you might observe that you no more decide the next thought you think than the next thought I write. No, you don't decide the next thought you think. No, you don't. You don't. But you decide to think or not to think. Again, I mean to think rationally, logically, intelligently, in full focus, with a purpose, honestly, not fudging things or anything else, anything less than that. That is up to you, and that is not determined. No moment of serious self-scrutiny will show you, oh, when I seriously scrutinize myself, I see that sometimes I sit down and work things out and concentrate and mobilize all my resources, try to be logical, don't permit myself rationalizations. And that just happens. And other times, I don't do that, and that just happens. There's no self-scrutiny that's going to say, like, whether you're paying attention now or vegging out is something that just happens to you. So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more to say, particularly about how thoughts do occur to you. I'm seeing, please stand by. That may mean I'm off. Dylan?
Sorry, it was me. I was trying to show you we've got some questions whenever
Yeah,
you're ready.
good. Well, it's now time for those questions.
Okay, so we have quite a long one from Bonnie. She says, what if volition or free will was just a new type of action, the self-generated, as opposed to automatic action of consciousness? What if it was simply the action of initiating and directing one's own attention?
Yep, that's what it is. Turning, attending to something and choosing within what is available to you, which thing you're going to focus on. Yes, that is it.
She clarifies in a few more super chats. She says that would make it the precondition of choice, because in order to choose among two or more existents, one first has to direct attention toward each of them in turn. Yeah. This ability to generate attention makes it possible for us to abstract, to form concepts, to use reason. And she keeps accidentally.
Yeah, she's right. She's using the word choice in a little narrow way. I think that's why there's a question. She's clearly studied objectivism. Choice in one sense means a selection among consciously viewed alternatives, right? Should I have the pizza or the salad? Or the pizza and the salad? There's a thought. The choice to think is not like that. You don't sit down and say, no, I could think about this. No, it's not about that. I could turn on my mind and make a decision, or I could continue to drift. If that's a serious question for you, you're already thinking. So now you're thinking about whether you're going to continue to think, not about whether you're thinking or not. So the choice to initiate a process of thought precedes any content. I'm going to look, it's like you open your eyes and focus on something. That's comes before, well, I'm going to go over there because I like what I see over there. So she's right that I think where she's maybe questioning is that to be called a choice? And it is, but it's not a process of conscious selection. So that's the word I would use for what she's talking about. You have an array of things that are in your mind or in your vision, and you're picking one with full consciousness of the others that you could have picked. No, it's not that. But it is a choice in that it's up to you. And you have to do it by putting forth the effort and the will if it's going to happen. Now, people also will ask, well, aren't there times when you just, like, I can't help but think? Now, remember, we're talking about thinking logically, rationally. Thinking is not just saying words in your head. It does involve saying words in your head. I want to be clear about that. But it's not any old words. So I'm going to give an example in a later session about two inner monologues of people who choose opposite ways. And both of them have an inner monologue. But one of them is purposeful, logical, rational, and the other is aimless, emotion-driven, short-range, self-destructive. So you choose whether to be in full focus using all the resources available to you, not, the things that, I can't help but think about my upcoming trip to California, or the girl I'm in love with, I've just discovered I'm in love with, or the operation I'm to undergo. Well, you can't help but have certain words go through your mind, but whether you deal with them rationally or not is a matter of effort. That's not given. That's a long answer to say you're right, but choice is broader than selection.
Okay, we have a question from the $5 scholar who asks, to the extent that someone is out of focus but also awake, isn't determinism true in a way psychologically, since
Yes.
they're pushed and pulled around by thoughts and influences impinging on them?
Yes, absolutely. That if you don't choose to use your free will, then things will just happen to you. Then you will be like a puppet on a string. And that's why we observe, I guess it's okay to let the cat out of the bag. How come so many Catholics are children of Catholics? I mean, it's probably 95%, isn't it? How is it that so many Baptists are children of Baptists? So many Jews are children of Jews. Now, it doesn't matter if it's 85% or 99%. Doesn't that argue for determinism of the environment? No, it argues for how few people think rationally on that kind of demanding topic. So you don't find that people whose favorite color is blue are overwhelmingly children of parents whose favorite color was blue. You don't find that people who like Apple are overwhelmingly children of parents who like Apple. There might be some correlation, and it could be good reasons for that. I mean, Apple as opposed to Windows or Linux. So people think about concrete things. They think about what clothes to wear. They think about whether they should diet. They think about, even a little bit about whom to vote for. There's a lot of crowd following in that. Tribalism, Ayn Rand called it. But people give some attention to it. But they don't think about, is there a God? Not past the age of, 20. They don't think about it. They don't rationally sit down. Now, when I say people, I mean so many people. If you're not thinking about a difficult topic like the existence of God, you're likely to just follow the crowd. You're likely to be socially determined. But that's because you decided not to think about it. But it is helpful to distinguish topics by the degree of abstractness and threateningness of them. So it's not threatening if you disagree with your parents about Windows versus Apple. It may be if you disagree with them about Catholicism versus some other sect or atheism. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't feel threatened about that. You should just hope your parents don't disappoint you. That's the logical position, I hope when I tell them that I'm an atheist, they don't go bonkers and I have to lose respect for them. Okay?
A question from Michael. He asked, does the uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics disprove the mechanistic nature of matter asserted by the Determinus?
Literally, yes, but fundamentally, no. If you take the word mechanism very literally, and I'm in favor of very literal takings of terms, to mean a mechanical, like the way a clock works or a car engine works, stuff pushing and pulling on other stuff according to physical forces we can perceive. Yeah, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics generally says no at the very, very small level below what you can perceive and below even what optical microscopes can resolve. That fine level does not work like a car engine. There's different kinds of properties that add up to give you a car engine if you get trillions of them. So in the literal sense, it shows that it's not mechanism, but it doesn't show that it's not determinism, and doesn't show that it's indeterminism, fortunately, because that would be as bad, if not worse, than determinism. So it's irrelevant to philosophy. You need philosophy to understand and get to quantum mechanics. So it's not that quantum mechanics is going to settle something about philosophy. It's not that you're going to go into the laboratory and say, hey, I found out I don't exist. I did the science and the science comes back, you don't exist. So I have to go with the science. Or I went into the laboratory and I found out no experimental results show anything. That would be a popular contemporary vein. That's a self-contradiction. The experimental results are that experimental results are worthless. We'll talk about the Benjamin Libet experiment later on in a later episode, where some people, not Libet, but some people say, science has now shown us that we don't really think. We think, but everything is determined. And they proved it in the lab. Proved it to whom? A thinking being or a determined puppet? So I say to those people, I'm sorry, you can't help but think that Libet refuted free will, but he didn't, and you're in the grip of determining forces that are compelling that belief on your brain.
So we have a few general questions. First,
You
one
mean
from
not on free will?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think we ought to save those unless somebody paid a lot of money to get a quick answer.
Okay, we do have one from last week. So if you want to get the one
Okay,
from
all
last
right,
week,
let's
that way
just
we
take
can-
one. Okay.
From the Shadow Blade, he says, "What are some of the signs of a lost cause so you don't waste time on people who just cannot be reasoned with? I've been having trouble breaking away."
Oh, I see. I thought he meant a lost cause in the culture, but you mean certain people who are a lost cause. It sounds like you're trying to persuade somebody of your viewpoints. And that's a mistake. You can offer material to a mind and then stand back. You can lead a man to reason, but you can't make him think. And if he feels I'm being propagandized here, I'm being, I've got a missionary for objectivism or whatever it is, he's going to resist. So I think it's important to challenge the whole idea of the cause is that you're trying to change his mind. That doesn't mean you're indifferent to what he thinks and you wouldn't be pleased if he changed his mind, but it means you have to recognize he has free will. He also has his own values, his own interests, but he has free will. He's in charge of his mind. And if he wants to come to certain conclusions and ask you about, hey, where do you get that from? You can help him.
Yeah, we do have one last minute free will question from P. Gupta, who asks, "Is not choosing a choice? Please elaborate."
It's badly phrased. I get the intent. Not thinking is a choice, but I think it's a choice made by two things. One is just inaction. One is just not doing the work. So if you don't get out of bed, that's a choice of action. The other is things that people do to fog things up for themselves. Chief among them is rationalization. There is straight out evasion, which we'll talk about next time, but rationalization, the inventing of phony reasons to hide from yourself your real reason. And that's a definite choice of doing something. So you have the option, let us say, of not doing anything with your mind, vegging out. You have the option of lying to yourself to maintain the conclusion you want to maintain. And you have the choice of honestly facing reality and trying to find out what's true to the best of your ability. Now, all of those are volitional. That is, you don't have to do. God and nature and other people don't make you do whichever one you do. But it's a little confusing to say not choosing is a choice. It's a choice by default. It's not a conscious choice. I guess it could be in the extreme case. I don't want to think. I don't want to think, like a Dostoevsky character would say that. I'll be damned if I'll think. But most people just let go. So this will become a clearer in the next meeting 2 weeks from today, where I talk about the way the conscious mind interacts with the subconscious, the way that free will is manifested, what you can do with your subconscious and what you can't. I've discussed it very philosophically today, but I'm going to discuss it more from the mechanics in 2 weeks. It being the choice that you confront, the primary choice to use your mind or not. I'm going to discuss how that comes up. Okay, I think that's plenty for this time, even counting the time that the internet went down for me. So let me thank you all for coming, and thank you, Dylan, for hosting. And thanks to the Ayn Rand Institute for supporting financially this effort. I hope and I expect a book on free will to come out of it. Thank you. See you in 2 weeks.